Today, I'll be talking about trauma as dysregulation, specifically how early emotional abuse or neglect impacts the developing nervous system, and why healing should focus first on restoring safety and regulation. This model does come from component-based psychotherapy, but it is supported across trauma research. When most people think of trauma, they think of memories or specific events, but trauma, especially complex childhood trauma, is so much more about how the body actually learns to respond to that stress as a coping mechanism and survival um, response. When children don't have the caregivers who help them settle or feel safe, their nervous systems adapt in ways that are protective at the time but end up being harmful later on. This presentation explains how dysregulation appears across emotional, physical, cognitive, and relational domains, and why trauma therapy should begin by restoring a sense of safety. In CBP, regulation means the ability to notice what's happening on the inside, to the ability to tolerate it, and then the ability to respond flexibly. Children develop regulation through consistent co regulation when their caregiver helps them calm down and make sense of their feelings. When emotional abuse or neglect takes place, that process doesn't get to happen, and instead, dysregulation becomes the child's baseline. Their nervous system then learns that the world is an unsafe place and that strong feelings are overwhelming, and they don't have the capacity or the tools to know how to deal with those strong feelings. Dysregulation can show up in many forms. Emotionally, it can be extremes in the form of panic, rage, and or numbness. Physically, survivors often oscillate between hyperarousal, like racing heart or tension, and hypoarousal, which may feel like numbness or dissociation. Cognitively, they may hold trauma based beliefs such as I'm bad or people can't be trusted. Behaviorally, coping can look like over controlling everything or also acting out impulsively and risk seeking behaviors. And because trauma happens in relationships, it makes relationships difficult later, as trust, boundaries, closeness, and repair are all affected by this. Children learn safety by being soothed. Um, this process takes place over the course of multiple times in a child's childhood, often hundreds of times. That process of repetition, wires their nervous system to expect safety. When that doesn't happen, when the child doesn't learn safety by being soothed, the child never internalizes a sense of calm. As adults, this can lead to chronic uncertainty and a deep sense that emotions are dangerous and uncontrollable. It also shapes identity. Survivors often develop beliefs about themselves, such as I'm unlovable, or I'm broken, or I can't do anything right, which can influence relationships and self worth throughout their life. Neurobiological effects. So, neuroscience clearly shows us that early childhood trauma affects developing stress response systems. The connections between the limbic system, the emotional center, and the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking and regulating center, don't work together as efficiently. Survivors often struggle to read their own internal cues, and this makes sudden shifts into panic or shutdown more likely. Understanding these biological foundations helps explain why regulation must be addressed before memory processing in therapy. So, one of the biggest misconceptions in trauma therapy is that we should immediately dive into memory processing, but overwhelming arousal can shut down the very parts of the brain that are needed for reflective thinking. So, this approach to just diving into memory processing of their trauma is harmful and can be very triggering and overwhelming. Uh, so, the research shows that without stabilization, exposure therapy like this can be ineffective and even extremely harmful, and it can turn people away from therapy. So, for this reason, therapy must start with building regulation skills and safety. So, it's important that we help the client stay within a manageable window of tolerance. Only once that foundation is in place can deeper memory processing be more effective. So, because trauma is held in the body, we need interventions that work from the bottom up to help us release that trauma from the body. Somatic practices such as grounding techniques, mindful breathing, sensory motor approaches, trauma sensitive yoga, working out, walking, all of these things help survivors relearn what safety feels like. These practices build interoceptive awareness and they create a noticing of self that can observe sensations without becoming overwhelmed. And over time, this physically restructures the nervous system towards greater stability. The therapeutic relationship is one of the most powerful tools for healing. We know that trauma is created in the relationship and it can also be healed in relationships. Um, Trauma damages attachment, and therapy provides that opportunity to repair it. A steady, attuned therapist offers co regulation. It's that calm presence the survivor didn't get as a child. Over time, repeated experiences of safety can restructure the relational and emotional patterns in the nervous system. And component based psychotherapy emphasizes collaboration and choice so that the client regains a sense of agency and avoids recreating those feelings of past powerlessness. Conclusion. So, to summarize, trauma, especially emotional abuse and neglect, it creates long-lasting dysregulation across emotional, physical, cognitive, and relational domains. Because dysregulation is the core injury, therapy then must focus first on building safety, regulation, and embodied awareness. Through somatic practices and a strong therapeutic relationship, survivors can develop the internal stability and self trust that they never had. This foundation allows them to eventually engage in memory processing from a grounded and empowered place, further allowing them to process those painful memories and work through them.